Hi, everyone. To start off our night, we have author Bill Konigsberg, who wrote several books, including Openly Straight, Honestly Ben, and most recently, The Music of What Happens. Welcome, Bill, and thank you so much for chatting with us tonight.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Hi, everybody. Yeah, this is really a fun way to start the weekend for me.
Excellent. Can you just start off and just give us a little introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Bill Konigsberg, and uh, before all of this, the kind of weird fact about me is that I used to be a sports writer. So my background was in sports journalism, and all I ever really wanted to do was write novels. And I'm gay, and so that was kind of unusual to be a sports writer who is also gay. And I think what I really wanted to do was write books where that would help young LGBTQ people see themselves, because when I was a kid, that wasn't a thing. So that's what I do. I live in Arizona. I have a husband. I have two dogs. I wish they were here with me in this room, but they would probably start barking, and I thought that would be tough for everybody.
So, can you tell us a synopsis about your latest book, The Music of What Happens?
Yes. So the music of what happens is about two boys, Max and Jordan, who are living in Arizona, Mesa, Arizona, like across the street from where I live. And they're two very different boys. Max is kind of a dude bro who's into sports. He's half Mexican, half Irish. Jordan is a sort of effeminate white boy who's into poetry. And they are thrown together one summer to work on Jordan's family's food truck. And the stakes are high because Jordan's family may become homeless if they don't make a lot of money. And it turns out that Max and Jordan are kind of tasked with saving, making the food truck work. And what really happens is they fall in love while working on it. So it's a love story. And I think one of the things I like to hear about it from people is that it's like an easy to read, fun love story that's funny, that has like oh, I almost cursed. Oh my God, has a lot of depth to it. So it'll often surprise people that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of giving me Aristotle and Dante feels,
Sure.
which, like, to me, that's probably my favorite book
Mm.
ever. And so, if I anytime like suggest that any book is like that, that's like the highest compliment you can get from me. Um,
Thank you. I love Ben, and I love that book. So.
Absolutely. So I love how poetic the music of happens is. Can you kind of explain what the title means?
Yes. So the music of what happens actually is the last phrase of a Seamus Heaney poem. And there's a backstory there, because I'm not like particularly into poetry, but I was struggling to write this book. I was just getting started. I wasn't sure that much about it. And we had two friends over for dinner, believe it or not, a pastor and his wife, very liberal pastor, but still a pastor. And he all of a sudden said, "Hey, I want to share with you a poem." And we're at the dinner table, and he just recited this poem out of nowhere. And like, I was like, who does that? But it was so cool because I'd never had anyone do that. And it's a really great poem. And when he said the final line, the thing about the music of what happens, my brain just exploded. And I was like, oh, well, that's the title of the book, which was before that called Max and Jordan. So better title. And it really gave me a lot to play with. And so I started to really think about what the music of what happens means. And to me, it means it's sort of like the music of all the things that happen in the world, the symmetry, the melody, the way that the world works together, the coincidences. So I love all that stuff. And it made for a fun thing to write about.
Yeah, and I love the poem that Jordan writes and
Yeah.
recites to everybody.
Yes, Jordan recites a poem, writes a poem about how hard his life is, and that he feels under the ground, and that he needs a shovel to dig up from underground. He's so low, and frankly, I don't really know where that came from, but that's not unusual for me as a writer. So many times I'll just be writing, and I'll be like, "Where did that come from?" And I don't even know, but yeah, I just go with it.
So in your story, Jordan and Max run a food truck. So we all want to know is how much research did you have to do about food trucks, and more specifically, how many food trucks you have to eat at for research purposes?
Well, I hadn't ever been on a food truck, and I didn't know that much about them when I started the book. The reason I did this, the book starts at a farmer's market in Gilbert, Arizona, and that's the farmer's market that every Saturday morning my husband and I go to with the dogs. It's like something we do every week. And I was always fascinated with them. So when I decided to write this book, I did have to do a lot of research, and I worked on 3 different food trucks. It was, by the way, May. The book is set in June in Phoenix area of Arizona, which is desert. And I will tell you that in May, it was unbearable on these food trucks. It was just way too much. Are you there, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, because my screen just changed, and I'm just going to go with it.
Oh, it's just somebody entered the room, so there's more light in the room.
Oh, okay. No problem. Hi. Anyway, so I went on this food truck in May. They had no air conditioning. I used that truck to be sort of the prototype for the truck they have. And I gave it no air conditioning and a broken window and, you know, all of these problems. It was so unpleasant that all I could do was laugh while I was on it, because it was like, what circle of hell am I in? So that was an interesting experience, and I could see how they would both hate it and then over time just love it, because it's such a weird, unlike anything else feeling to be that warm.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I would just completely pass out from the heat. I
Yeah,
wouldn't be able
I'm
to hack it.
really sensitive, so I made it. I was like on for 2 hours, and I was like, "Oh, I'm good. I'll go home now." That was enough for me.
So you talked a bit about how you were a sports writer before. How did you get started writing novels?
So I was about 31, and I was working at ESPN, and I liked it, and I was excited about what I was doing. But in the back of my head, I always wanted to write novels. So in high school, before high school, and college, I studied creative writing. And in college, I remember somebody telling me, I think one of my teachers saying, you know, you just can't make any money as a fiction writer. And I think I really internalized that and thought, well, then I can't do that. And by the way, they're not completely wrong. It's really hard to make money in writing fiction, but it didn't take away from the fact that that's really what I'm meant to do in this world. And it's what I love doing most. So I decided at 31 to go back to school, to go to graduate school for creative writing. And that's where I really got going. And I started to write books. And the first book I wrote there was Out of the Pocket, which became my first novel.
So can you tell us a bit about the process of getting your first novel published?
Yeah, you know, but first of all, it was in the dark ages. I sold that book in 2006. It came out in 2008, and at that time, we were using snail mail. Like that doesn't exist anymore. Obviously, like people who are watching this are like, "What's that?" So, you know, I would have to take, print out my 300-page manuscript and send it somewhere to have somebody read it, and most likely then reject it. So, you know, you can imagine how quickly the pages add up. It was really time consuming and all of this. But the way that it works is that you find, and what happened for me is I went to a conference where I found an agent, and that agent liked my work and agreed to represent me. And then she slowly, I think she would send it off to like 3 publishing houses at a time. And Penguin bought the book. They were about the 9th to see it. And I got 8 rejections first, but they decided to buy it. Out of the Pocket, I didn't know what to expect. And it's kind of different when you have a first book. Nobody knows who you are. And oftentimes first books kind of get ignored a little bit unless you're really lucky. But the book did okay, and some people read it. And it really, though, wasn't until I wrote Openly Straight that I began to have a following. I think Openly Straight was really the book that put me on the map. And I'm really glad I wrote that book.
I am too. So what's the most challenging aspect of writing?
2 things. Like one is being lonely. Writing is really a solitary process. And the way this works is, I am home or at a coffee shop writing most of the day. My husband goes to work. He comes home after spending a day seeing too many people. I've seen no people. And all I want to do is be social at that point, and all he wants to do is watch TV. So that's kind of hard, the social aspect or the dealing with loneliness. And the other thing is simply it's really, really hard until I find the story. Um, when I'm starting something, it usually takes me a month or two to kind of find my way. And at that time, I have so much self-doubt and I'm saying such mean things to myself. Even today, I'm writing my seventh novel now, and I'll still go through this thing where in my brain I'm thinking, oh, I'm a hack. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to write a sentence. I don't know how to write a story. I shouldn't do this, blah, blah, blah. So every time I still go through that.
Yeah, I've heard that from other authors that are very well known also, and I'm always surprised by it because I'm just like, I think you're an amazing writer and very successful. So I
Thank
hope
you.
you feel that way about yourself.
Oh, I appreciate that. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of person who is able to hear that and take it in.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's I wish I was, because I'd be happier. But it's all good.
Okay.
I
So
love
the
what I do.
next few questions I've kind of stolen from like inside the actor studio.
Oh.
Um, so like, what's your favorite word?
Okay. Cattywampus.
Oh, that's great.
That's a good
What's
word.
what's your least favorite word?
The word I like the least is moist. I
Oh
hate that
God.
word. That word is terrible. It's the way it sounds, and it's moist.
If you had to choose a career other than what you do, what would you do?
I would probably be in unemployment because I am not very good at jobs. I don't even know. I mean, I think I'm bad at, like, serving people. I could be a terrible waiter. I'm not good at office jobs. Maybe I'd be a teacher. Yeah, okay, go with that.
What profession would you never want to do?
All of the others. My husband's a lawyer. I'll put that number one. The stuff he reads is so boring. Oh my God.
Yeah, so nothing that you'd want a job where you can be creative.
Yes, I need to be creative. I don't do well sort of, sitting at a desk and filling out forms or doing that kind of stuff.
So what scares you?
What scares me? Probably a lot of the same things that scare other people. I love my family so much. I mean, my husband and my two dogs, I consider my kids. So I think that losing them scares me. I don't mean to be maudlin, but that's something that I get afraid of. Um, the direction of our country scares me a lot.
Yeah.
Global warming scares me. Climate chaos, whatever you want to call it.
And what makes you laugh?
Climate chaos. No, I'm kidding. What makes me laugh? Oh, the show 30 Rock makes me laugh. I know it's really old now, but I've probably seen every episode of 30 Rock about 15, 20 times. So that makes me laugh. Oh, and John Mulaney, the comedian John Mulaney, makes me laugh.
What's your favorite food?
Raspberries.
Ooh, I've never gotten that answer before. I like that.
I love raspberries.
Do you have a favorite place that you've traveled to?
What was really, really cool was the Isle of Skye in Scotland. That is one of the most unique places. It's certainly the most unique place I've ever seen in terms of just the beauty of the landscape and the odd tint of the place, the color of the place. Loved it.
So this is kind of my favorite question because I always love to hear authors talk about any memories they have of libraries. Do you have any
Ah.
distinct memories of an interaction in a library or with a librarian?
I have one, and I don't know that this is going to be your favorite because I think I might have said to you when we were chatting, I wasn't really a library kid. I was a sports kid. Like I played baseball in high school, and before that, I was always out playing ball. Um, and so I didn't really hang out in libraries, but I did really like to write. And in my elementary school, there was this librarian, and for some reason, I guess she had like little books of, do you know what Reader's Digest is? The little
Yes.
magazine?
Yep.
And they have this column called Life in These United States. And it said that you could submit your own. And I was 8 and I wrote one and I gave it to her. And I remember her thinking that I must be the strangest kid ever. It didn't get accepted in the magazine, but at 8, I was trying really hard. So
Hey, that's really great. I know. I think when you do things as kids and like adults encourage you and you really don't have any idea what you're doing,
oh my
honestly,
God.
when you look back on it, you have to just smile and be like, I tried something, even though
That's
it
right.
was beyond, what possibility.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm glad I tried. She
absolutely.
was lovely, by the way.
So so we were discussing this a little bit. What have you read in the last year?
Okay, so books that I've read. So the Mason Deaver book I've read, and I know Mason's coming on, and you'll be talking to them later. And that book is fantastic. I've read Deposing Nathan by Zach Smedley, and I liked that. That's an LGBTQ title, recent. An upcoming title. I think The Brigid Kemmerer is an upcoming title. Call It What You Want, I don't think has come out yet. I tend to read books before they're out. But I love Bridget's newest book. And another one called um, Ziggy, Stardust, and Me by James Brandon. He's a debut author, and I loved that book. I thought that book was amazing. And Shout,
Oh
Lori Harrison
yeah.
Anderson. Yeah,
Actually,
she
we've
really wrote
talked to
that.
Lori, and she might actually be doing NTL chats next year. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh my God, she is amazing. I love working with her. She's just wonderful.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So, who is your favorite fictional character?
Um, my favorite fictional character, and some of the people watching this may actually know this now or understand who I'm talking about, is Michael Tolliver, whose nickname is Mouse from Tales of the City. That just became a Netflix series, so people got to meet that character. But there were a series of 6 books to begin, and now I think there are 9 by a guy named Armistead Maupin. And Michael Tolliver was the first character I ever read who reminded me of me.
Oh, I love that. Like, I think that's so important is being able
Yeah,
to find any book where you can see yourself in that character. And um, I love the landscape of why is changing. There's really becoming something for everyone.
absolutely. I mean, I am amazed at how much it's changed. And, when I started this, there were a few LGBTQ titles every year. In 2008, I think there were 25 or 30. That number has exploded by,
Hmm.
you know, I mean, times 10, times 5, I don't know. But there are so many, and that means that we have more of a broad spectrum. And what we really need right now, because of who our LGBT, who our kids are gender fluid characters and characters on the trans spectrum, non-binary characters. So we're getting them.
Absolutely. I remember Julie Murphy wrote Dumplin', and that came out on Netflix, and I was like, yes, we have like this fat heroine, and like I needed that when I was a teenager.
Absolutely. Oh my God. I loved that book. And by the way, the series, it's rare when a series or a movie is as good as the book, but that was. It's
Yeah,
really good.
absolutely. So, what was your favorite childhood book?
I loved all the Judy Blume books. You know, I don't want to say, I mean, I was kind of an odd kid. I was this like little jock boy who was really sensitive. And I just would read all of these books that were about, teenage girl adolescence for the most part, and I was fascinated by it. I was really curious to know more, and so I'd steal all my sister's Judy Blume books.
So I know you mentioned 30 Rock, but so what's your favorite TV show? And it could be 30 Rock, movie, and band.
Oh, this is so hard. Yeah, I know that this is going to sound like I'm making it up, but truly right now, my favorite movie is Crazy Rich Asians. And the reason for that is I've watched it about 4 or 5 times because it's so well put together that I'm studying it for plot. That's actually true. I love that movie. And I want to go to Singapore now. In terms of TV shows, so many good TV shows out there. I mean, TV series out there. I can't really pick one, and I usually, when I'm asked a question, I forget everything that I'm watching. So I'll say 30 Rock, but that's probably not true. And band, as a kid, I loved this band called Missing Persons. Right now, I have 3 favorite artists. And if you didn't know I was gay before, you'd now know I'm gay. They're all female vocalists. Lizzo, Haley Reinhart.
Oh, yeah.
Lizzo is the best. Haley Reinhart and Janelle Monáe, my favorites.
Okay. So, is there an author that you would freak out about meeting in real life? Somebody that you would fanboy over?
Yeah. Not in YA because I've met almost all the YA authors, but I mean, I fanboy over some of them anyway, like A.S. King. I fanboy over constantly because A.S. King is amazing. In the world of authors, I'd probably say Toni Morrison. I would just go crazy.
I love that. I feel like when I ask that question to a lot of authors, like the immediate response is J.K. Rowling, and I'm like, no, think a little deeper. I mean, everybody would freak out meeting J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling is responsible for my career because she was with Arthur A. Levine Books, and that's the place I was at for all of my books after the first. So it was only because of J.K. Rowling that I have a career. So thank you.
So there are audio versions of your books. Do you have any involvement in the production? Have you listened to the recordings?
Yeah, I've listened to them all, and I will tell you this. I would, like, if I go on a long trip, I'll listen to one of my audiobooks, and I have to keep turning it off because it's actually like spending too much time with myself.
That's really funny.
It's really unpleasant. I'm like, God, I'm a lot. But anyway, each book I've gotten a little bit more involved, and I got to pick out the people the performers for The Music of What Happens. We have 2 authors, 2 readers.
I love both voices, but I especially love the narrator who did Max.
Yeah, Max was my favorite too. I thought Max, I actually fought for him. They were going in another direction, and I was like, no, this guy is the one who understands Dude Bro. He gets it exactly right. Yeah.
So what projects are you currently working on?
So the big one that comes out next year, and I'm finishing up my edits for it, is called The Bridge. And The Bridge is basically about 2 teens, Aaron and Tilly, who are both 17, who meet on top of the George Washington Bridge in New York. They're both there to jump. And in the very first scene of the book, they're both sitting 100 feet apart from each other. They interrupt each other. They don't know each other. And based on what happens in their next decision, the moment that they are staring at each other 100 feet apart, the world splits into 3 different realities. And in the first, the boy jumps, and we get the girl's life in the aftermath of not jumping, and we also get what happens to the boy's family and all of that. And that story ends, then we go right back to that same moment, and this time the girl jumps, and we get the boy's life if he, when he doesn't jump, and we get the girl's family story. And in the third, they both decide not to jump, and we get the connection that they form and forge, and how it becomes life-altering for them. So it's really about how the impact of our choices at this moment like that, when I relate to this because I dealt with suicidal depression in my younger life. And I know how it can feel like our lives don't matter, but this is really a book about just how important it is for us to stay here.
I love that. So that's a little bit of a departure for
Yeah.
from like your last few books.
Yeah, it's a total departure, but it still has an LGBTQ aspect, but it's not entirely. And I just always like to challenge myself. And I think that The Bridge will wind up being my best book by far. I'm working on it now, and I feel really excited about it.
I'm really excited to read it. It kind of reminds me a little bit how you described of Gail Forman's book. Oh gosh, now of course I can't remember her title of it.
Yeah,
It's the
I
one
am
last
not.
she wrote.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that because I picked up that book at the nearby bookstore. I was going on a trip and I needed something to read, and I read it, and I was already working on The Bridge, and I was like, "What?" Because it has a lot of similarities. And I wrote Gail, who's a friend of mine. I was like, "So you're gonna think that I copied you?" But I didn't. Our books are different enough, but yeah, there's some similarities there.
Maybe like the reverse of like They Both Die at the End by Adam
Right.
Silvera, which I also
They
really
both
like.
Yes, they both live at the end. Yeah.
So what's on your bucket list?
More travel, much more travel. I am closing in on 50 years old, and I really want to see more of the world. I've never been to Asia. I've never been to Australia. This year, a month from now, we're going on a cruise to the Baltic, so to Northern Europe, and I'm so excited about seeing Scandinavia. But I need more of that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I agree. What advice would you give to your teenage self?
I wouldn't give any advice to my teenage self because he wouldn't listen to me. But what I would do is I would hug on him a lot, and I would just tell him that despite all of the things that he thinks about himself, he's really quite wonderful and lovely. Um, when I think about that, it makes me sad that I wasted so much time not liking myself. And I see the same thing in a lot of teenagers who I meet. And I think, I just wish you knew how beautiful you are. And I know maybe you won't be able to see that yet, but I hope someday you'll get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way with my teens at my library.
Yeah.
I had a teen tell me that that she was ugly, and I was like, "Where did you get this idea?"
Oh, yeah.
And it really bothered me. So
Yeah, it's a shame, but that's, the messages that the world sends out for young people, unfortunately, are really tough. And I think it's only gotten worse with social media. I just don't know how anybody is able to navigate that. It's such a minefield.
definitely. Well, we're at our final question.
Oh,
Do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
yeah, I would say this. Stop thinking about what's going to sell or what's going to happen, and write your story. So often I feel like people edit themselves. And the truth is that if you're a writer, you have a story to tell that's only you. And the reason that it's going to succeed, if it's going to succeed, is because it's the story that only you can tell. So just go and do that. Do that thing. Be you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. We really appreciate having you here tonight
It
and
was,
taking the time to chat with us.
thank you. It was lovely to talk to you. And thanks for having me.